I'm going to start off with a different type of monologue. I've gone back into the video archives and I found something that I thought is from 1986, I believe. It's Ronald Reagan, what it means to be an American.
This national feeling is good, but it won't count for much, and it won't last unless it's grounded in thoughtfulness and knowledge. An informed patriotism is what we want. And are we doing a good enough job teaching our children what America is and what she represents in the long history of the world? Those of us who are over 35 or so years of age grew up in a different America. We were taught very directly what it means to be an American. And we absorbed almost in the air a love of country and an appreciation of its institutions. If you didn't get these things from your family, you got them from the neighborhood, from the father down the street who fought in Korea, or the family who lost someone at Anzio. Or you could get a sense of patriotism from school. And if all else failed, you could get a sense of patriotism from the popular culture. The movies celebrated democratic values and implicitly reinforced the idea that America was special. TV was like that too, through the mid-60s. But now we're about to enter the 90s, and some things have changed. Younger parents aren't sure that an unambivalent appreciation of America is the right thing to teach modern children. And as for those who create the popular culture, well-grounded patriotism is no longer the style. Our spirit is back, but we haven't re-institutionalized it. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs production. So we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here, who Jimmy Doolittle was, and what those 30 seconds over Tokyo meant. You know, 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who had fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanata Hen, and she said, "We will always remember. We will never forget what the boys of Normandy did." Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and a greater emphasis on civic ritual. And let me offer lesson number one about America. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. So tonight in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. And children, if your parents haven't been teaching you what it means to be an American, let them know and nail them on it. That would be a very American thing to do.
Wow, words that still ring true today. Let me bring in Mario Murillo. Mario, when you hear President Reagan, I mean, it sounds like he was talking about the 90s coming. Here we are in 2021. It sure applies to today, especially when he talks about all great change begins at the dinner table. Your thoughts?
The scary moment that we're living in was predicted by Reagan, only he understated how deeply we would be affected by it. Our children hate our history. They are absolutely being poisoned against freedom right now for the very reasons that President Reagan described. I think it is an urgent moment and a wake-up call. That video needs to be played everywhere.
Yeah, amen. It does. I agree. All right, John Graves, I'm going to bring you in here, millionvoices.org. President Reagan spoke about well-grounded patriotism. Basically has gone out of style. If it was that way prior to the 90s, where are we at now?
Yeah, it makes me think of the scripture in the Message where he says, don't follow whims and fashions, hold true to God's word because it never withers, never passes away, and never goes out of style. And so the sad thing, actually that was emotional for me to listen to that because he said freedom is fragile. And it really is. And he also said in a different place, it's never one generation removed, the freedoms that we have in this nation, one generation removed. We have to, as our generation, just like David did, serve God's purpose in our generation before we pass away in our little wisp here. And there's nothing we could do better than teach them to love God and teach them to love the only country in history that was founded to worship the God of the Bible. It was emotional, Gene.
It is emotional. In fact, I'm going to put that on our resource page. If you go to govictory.com/flashpoint, you can, on the resources at the bottom of the page, you'll have a link to President Reagan's speech there that you can share, as well as share this program on all your social media sites. All right, I want to keep moving here. I felt it's time, gentlemen, that we go back and revisit January 6th again. We've played some of these video before, but I want to play, let's go to clip number 2, about, this is entering the Capitol. And I just think it's important for you to see what was happening there. All right, so you see all the people there. Now look, they opened the doors, and John, I'm going to get you to comment to that. Now notice you will see Capitol Police at the doorway welcoming these so-called protesters into it. See, there's one right there on the right. The camera will pan over. There's one. There's 2, 3, 4. Now watch this as they enter the Capitol. I don't know if I've ever seen this before. Now I believe this is one of the main areas people were entering, but notice people coming down. And then look at this as the camera swings back around. What do we see here coming down the stairs? Right as we get to the top here, you're going to see a photographer. Now look at this. He was prepared. He has his camera there. He's ready to take photos. John, anybody, this is not difficult. Anybody looking at this video would say this was either planned or they didn't care.
It was clearly planned, and the senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, watched all the videos of the Capitol on January 6th. You and I were covering it that day. It was
right.
Not a bunch of people with weapons to try to destroy the Capitol and attack it and burn it down like Nancy Pelosi tries to say. 38% of the people in the Capitol were waved in by Capitol Police, according to Senator Johnson, who has seen all the videos. This was not an insurrection, and an enormous amount of those people are still in jail 8 months later, still in jail over going to hear the president speak. If they did stupid stuff, I don't care if you're on the far left, the far right, nobody condones that. We don't want that, and those people need to answer for that. But the overwhelming majority of these people were patriots who love this country and see that people are being trained, especially in our schools, to hate this nation and to hate what it stands for and to hate those who founded it. And these people love this country. I know many of them that were there, and they weren't anymore trying to burn down anything. They went in there, took some pictures, and there was so little damage that was done there, Gene. And that video, to me, is something that needs to be shared with everybody watching this and these facts.
You know, Mario, I want to get you to, we just played Ronald Reagan, and then we showed that video. We had to mute the audio because of all the expletives that are going through. But I mean, when you see that, it's like, this is from a communist country. You know, the wide swing in what we see, it's just almost hard to imagine this is America.
We have a serious moment ahead of us, and I want to comment directly and quickly. What we're watching in America is the manipulation of reality on a level that no society outside of China has ever experienced. North Korea, perhaps. But everything is being theater. It's for show. We want you to think things like the Capitol riots are worse than 9/11. It boggles the mind that they believe that they can insult our intelligence to this degree. And I am absolutely convinced that God is going to do a miracle and expose this entire fraud. It won't be by the hand of man. It'll be by the hand of God, but it's going to come down because they are so over the top. They have so overplayed their hand now.
And I think you're speaking truth there, Mario. All right, this sets up this next video from January 6th, and I saw this on social media again. It felt like it's quite poignant. It's just 35 seconds, but watch.
happened? Why haven't you called for backup? Where is your backup? This is our Capitol building, and y'all are letting it get destroyed on your watch. All of you, call for backup. Get some help down here. And if they don't want to give you backup, they obviously don't give a shit about you. These people want blood.
John, it's really hard to imagine why these men, and I want to praise, not everybody on the Capitol Police Force is bad, okay? We're not saying that. But they were clearly under orders not to respond.
Yeah, they were orders not to respond, not to get back up. And this is the thing. I agree with what Mario said. This is propaganda where they're trying to pitch a story to be one way. If you control the narrative, you control the videos, you control big tech, social media, all the mainstream media, then you can spin the story however you want to. They don't want to talk about Nancy Pelosi was in charge of security at the Capitol, and it wasn't like they didn't know there was going to be a speech, and it wasn't like they didn't know that there was going to be, the Electoral College count. We were covering it that day on the news. Some of the people from Victory News were there. And so for me, I love that this guy was standing up on the spot. He didn't get carried away and swept into it. He's like, hey, do the right thing here. Let's take care of the Capitol. Some people are getting ushered in, and some people were bad actors breaking windows and stuff. Let's stop that nonsense.
Yeah, I just don't, you brought up a great point, John, and I want to circle back to it. The whole point that Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, was in charge of security. Why isn't that being blasted from the mainstream media? John, I mean, help me understand, what possible reason would there not, is there any plausible reason to not have had better security there?
Yeah, there's not. It's inexcusable. And then she put a fence around it. She knows how to build a wall around her house or around the Capitol, but not to keep illegals from coming into the country. And so literally this is the real issue. And I agree with you. People are fed up with this kind of stuff. They're having to see it, but they have to fight to find the truth. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong about that. God uses resistance. He trains our hands for war. And sometimes we have to look through these things and discern the times and walk through all this propaganda and all this deception that's out there. And if the people of God wake up and the truth begins to come out about the election integrity, and I don't want to get too much into that unless you want to, but if that comes out in 2022, there could be a tidal wave swing where they start investigating. Why didn't you do that? Why don't we have the real story of what happened there? There needs to be an investigation of January 6th, but it needs to be a true audit, not a one-side witch hunt.
Yeah, I agree. All right, since you mentioned election integrity, we're going to pivot to that. And listen, this all comes back to election integrity. There is only one reason this would be this way, and it's all about the fraudulent election, or at least a questionable election. There, I'll give you that. All right, producer Jason Smith sat down with Sebastian Gorka recently and asked him about this very topic.
Obviously, election integrity it's the hot topic. Some people want to talk about it, some people don't. But isn't it important that we get this thing figured out and get it right before the midterms?
I met with the leadership of the GOP after the election, and I said to them very candidly, I said, there's only two things you need to demonstrate your commitment to, because if you don't, the party is over. Forget it, finished. Number one, Big Tech Censorship. We have to get a grip on these people who have more power than the U.S. government. I'm sorry. Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey literally have more power than the White House when it comes to controlling information. It's not a coincidence that Jen Psaki, the propagandist in chief, is actually openly discussing the collaboration of the White House with social media and telephone companies to censor your SMS text messages, because who knows, you might be sending disinformation. So this is the frightening level of power they have. So number one. And number two, election integrity. Look, let's be very clear about what happened last year. When you have, the Constitution is very clear. The state legislatures run elections. And I mean the legislature, not the Secretary of State, not the governors. So when governors and secretaries of state unilaterally decide to utterly change the way we ran the last elections, that is illegal. That is against the U.S. Constitution. And look, in a court of law, you have to ask the question, motivation. Explain to me, if you will, and this, I can give you many examples, but let's talk about the butcher of Richmond. Let's talk about Governor Northam of Virginia. Why would a governor who has no right to do this say for the first time in the Commonwealth's history during the last election that you don't need to verify the signatures of a mail-in ballot? What is the one and only possible motivation for not wanting to verify a signature? There's only one: to facilitate fraud whereby somebody signed it who isn't the voter. There's only one reason. And that happened again and again and again across the country. So yeah, absolutely. Big tech censorship and election integrity.
Big tech censorship, John, he mentioned, Sebastian Gorka mentioned about SMS text message monitoring. I know you're a tech entrepreneur. That's in your wheelhouse. Speak to that. Can they really do that?
They absolutely can. On these devices, they're being tracked everywhere you go, every app you've downloaded. They know how to do it. And they not only are censoring the mainstream media, censoring social media, now they're tracking the President Biden just said this, tracking and saying, oh, if you don't agree with us, which means it's disinformation because it's not our information, right? They're in control and they want to shut down anybody who disagrees with them, then they want to do it. They absolutely have the ability, the wherewithal, and the motive to do this. But I want to mention something else, Gene. He talked about what's the real motive that you would not want to see somebody's citizenship or ID and let them vote. And then there could be historic millions of people, and then we don't want to audit it. We don't want to talk about it. We want to call that a big lie. And I promise you, what's going to happen is the people of God are not going to give up. People who are truth seekers, God lovers, they're not going to stop, and they're going to keep looking for truth. And when it gets exposed, the best disinfectant is light, Gene. And so when the light gets shined on something, you should run to an audit on both sides. There's a lack of confidence. Remember, Hillary Clinton, nobody wants to talk about this. Hillary Clinton refused to concede in 2016. Based on what? It was a rigged election. It's like we need, on both sides of this country, we need audits that we know our citizens are the ones that are electing those who govern us. And until we get that, there's going to be a problem that we got to deal with.
And I'm glad you brought that up. It's not a Republican versus Democrat issue. There's corruption on both sides
That's
here.
it.
And so we've got to get to the core of what's going on. And Mario, I think there's a revival for that. Don't you think so?
Yes, watching us right now is a Christian hero somewhere that none of us know about. Mm-hmm. Goliath stood there and insulted the armies of Israel. That's what the leftists are doing to you and me. They're insulting us. They're telling us we're cowards, we're crazy, we're misguided, we've taken leave of our senses. And it's gone beyond just analysis. Now it is an insult on the highest level. And David came and saw two things: a mouth that shouldn't have been speaking and people that were silent who should have been speaking, because all of Israel was frozen in fear. But he broke it in one instance. Now, we don't have any record where God spoke to David and said, David, go out there and fight the giant. He understood it from the moment. We don't need a special revelation to understand the duty of every Christian in America right now. And David said, is there not a cause? And he told Goliath, you have insulted the armies of the living God, and you're going to die because of it. I believe someone's going to rise up. I believe in places all over America, people are going to rise up, and you don't realize how frail and how fundamentally vulnerable this facade that the left has built in America is, until a Christian stands up and thrusts the spear of truth, the sword of the Spirit, into the heart of darkness. It's going to be amazing. I expect it.
John, I'll get you to comment on this. I mean, we're seeing exactly, there seems to, I would say within the last month, seems like there's been a resurgence. We went through several months of like, oh man, what's going on? And now there's like, wait a minute, we're not going to just sit down and take this. We're going to stand up. Is that what you're seeing as well?
I 100% agree with you, Gene, and I think the reason is because I love what Mario said. There's not just one. There's
Right.
little old ladies. There's young men, young women. There's people of God that are out there like David that can be used by God. It takes one whistleblower to expose the greatest corruption in the country. It takes one person to admit what was happening, and God can convert a heart. God can change those hearts. God can expose those things. He can give you God ideas. We are a tech company, so I know the kind of things that can be done, and I'm believing and praying that I know some of them, and some of them are doing it. And I can promise you in the next few weeks and for sure in the next few months, you're going to see a lot of this that's irrefutable evidence of the kind of fraud that happened. But what I'm praying for is that there's thousands of people I've never met that I don't know. Please, if you're listening to us, have ears to hear. Do not quit. Do not give up. Do not grow weary in well-doing, because you will reap if you do not quit. And the scripture promises that. And if I could say one other thing, Gene, in Timothy, 1 Timothy 2:2, I was reading that a few weeks ago. I was praying, and my whole life I've prayed for, authorities, prayed for, those who rule over us. But I was reading the Amplified. I like to read in different translations because it makes my mind, understand a different depth of God. And in the Amplified, it says for the kings and those in authority, or those with high responsibility. And like a lightning bolt, I felt like God showed me, don't just pray for presidents, senators, governors, and state legislatures. Start praying for Mark Zuckerberg. Start praying for Dorsey and all the big tech people and the big corporation. Start praying for them. Those people are in high responsibility. And as believers, if we're praying for kings, even those that are feeding Christians to lions, we're still praying for them. Those who are trying to silence us, propagandize us, teach our kids to hate our nation and hate our God. Even those people, we're praying for them, for their hearts to be converted. There's no one that's beyond the arm of God's reach. And so we're praying not just for those who are in those positions, but those who are influencing them and electing them. They have, like Mario said, a lot more power than actually the President of the United States, because they get to control the narrative.
That's exactly right. All right, Donald Trump Jr. Is going to fit right into this conversation. And we talk to him about ways about getting involved. Watch.
You have to get involved. I think the other side, the left, has made getting involved in every level of every institution, of everything that we hold dear, a major part of their platform. We've sat by idly for 50 years, turning the other cheek as they've taken over sports and pop culture and academia and big government, and even, I'm not going to say the door kickers in law enforcement, but law enforcement. You see the woke military leaders now. It's absolutely insane. And so we have to combat that. We have to fight back with logic and with reason. And the best way to do that is to get kids before they're indoctrinated into these failed systems. That's what they're doing. I mean, from kindergarten on, the teachers, the unions, they're indoctrinating our kids with a bunch of nonsense. And we have to combat it.
So you just came off the stage and you had that group of students on their feet. Tell us a little bit about what you were sharing with them.
Well, I was talking about a little bit of everything. Obviously, my experience, with my mother having escaped communism. You see the track that we're going down, and you see Democrats openly advocating it for it. And yet you see Cuban refugees who are trying to come here, who are being shot at by a dictatorial regime, but they're not allowed to come into America. Now, if you go to Texas, you can come right across the border. So what's the difference? You're telling me it's because they're rioting because of COVID-19 vaccine shortages. I have a feeling it's the dictatorial regime, but why won't you let them in? Could it be because they've experienced the great virtues of communism and will not likely vote for a Democrat who's pushing it? Because that's the only delta. They're actual real asylum seekers as opposed to people looking, in many cases, looking just for free stuff. That's a difference. And, talking about all of those things. But there's a lot, obviously, and we gotta fight on every one of those fronts.
Isn't it amazing, even like from the Fauci emails to other things, how time reveals truth?
Yeah, I always say, the difference these days between a conspiracy theory and the truth is about 6 months. When it no longer matters to the other side, they get their win. Oh, well, that was true. Sure. And we'll release that information conveniently long enough after the fact so it doesn't matter, and short enough before the next election cycle so that people forget. The leftists, their religion is imposing their will upon you. Their left is getting rid of your religious liberty. That is their religion, and we got to wake up to that because they have weaponized it. They have weaponized every other institution in our government and in our country against us, and they are out to get you. If you don't think that's the case, you haven't been watching closely enough, and you should really open your eyes. What they're trying to impose on us is is not like, democratic socialism. Right. It's just communism. It's Marxism. And that should scare all of us. So we have to wake up and we have to get involved.
Yeah, John, as he was saying that, Don Jr., I mean, so many great comments he made there. Let's start with the ones coming across the border being turned away because they do know what a dictatorial regime looks like. They've experienced it.
100%, Gene, and it's ironic. Again, we have to discern as believers. It's ironic that we want to open the borders if you're on the left, unless it's something to do with Cuba, and all of a sudden BLM's founders, you just silence that because they don't want the truth that communism and socialism has never worked in the history of mankind. The border is a massive crisis. In one point last week, Gene, 20,000 people, 20,000 in 1 week came across one port into this country illegally. And a lot of them are escaping the horrors of communism. But when they get in here, they want a better life and they can expose that kind of stuff. One of the things we did, you and I talked about this a couple months ago. People want something to do. They want to know what to do, but they don't know what to do. So we built a tool at Million Voices. They can go there, sign up, and it'll tell them who their state rep is, who their state senator, and it doesn't come from us. It's not a petition. It's empowering them. We're trying to be the megaphone for millions and millions of people. They can go there, they sign up, and then the postcard comes straight from them to their people. We give them the phone number, the email. It's when you speak up and you began to be salt and light. You began to be the one that can change this thing. We're not just praying for them. We're praying, but we're also acting and moving and doing. If it's a little bitty stone on a great big giant, it can topple it and change history.
Amen. Well, thank you, John. I know we got to let you go, but millionvoices.org. Encourage you to check out the website and all that John has to offer there.